Right. Okay. Oh. Welcome back to Project Daily Drive. It's been a while since I've said that, hasn't it? Ooh. Yeah, so welcome back to what is essentially a little bit of a reboot of Project Daily Drive. You might notice a couple of things being a little bit different, and that's because I've decided to kind of do a soft reboot on the series. There's a good reason for that. Back when I started this series when I was in university back in 2019, oh god, so long ago, I never really kind of did a proper start to this. Did a meet Gene and then prattled on a bit before starting to do it properly. So I've decided I'm going to do a remake of an old video that I made basically called What's Wrong with Gene? I made that back when I was living with my parents and it wasn't a very good video, and obviously it's been a couple of years since then. Let's do a solid sit rep where we are with Gene so we can plan towards the future. So let's have a look at all the things that have gone wrong. I hope you're staying comfortably, you'll be here a while. So let's start with the engine, you know, the powerhouse of Gene. What's wrong with it? Well, the engine could be described as fine. I think that's the best way of describing Gene's engine. Starts pretty much every time, runs fine, maybe a little bit warmer than I'd like it to, but I've tried flushing the radiator out and it seems to be fine. You know, it doesn't really overheat, just seems to smell a bit warm, so yeah. The engine itself we pulled out back at the start of 2021. We pulled the engine out after my bonnet flipped off, stripped it down, cleaned it up, got all the gunge out of it, inspected it, and since then it's not been trouble free. I gave it a repaint, it looks good, but I never really did much mechanical work. I still haven't even changed that timing chain. Yeah. A couple of issues with it is that it still leaks. It leaks out the rear scroll seal really badly. I never tackled that because that is a pretty major job. And I've blown a head gasket since then. I don't know why. I think I might not have torqued the head down properly or maybe warped it, but I blew a head gasket. I haven't blown one since, but I know the old head gasket did fail. Not great. But like I said, it runs fine, but it's also... it's a worn engine. You know, there's a burnt out valve, it's still running on leaded fuel, it needs lots of little things doing to it. I'm probably just going to get the head rebuilt. The bottom end's perfectly fine, so at some point I'm probably going to take the head off, get it rebuilt, you know, skimmed, new valve seats, new valve stems, all of that. Get it sorted and right. The things around the engine though are what cause most of the problems. The distributor is very worn, so that's leading to a bit of dodgy timing on the spark. The carburetor's just had it. I can't even adjust this thing properly, so the engine's running really rich. And obviously the timing chain, I couldn't get that off. I nearly had a mental breakdown dealing with that thing, and I'm still not quite emotionally recovered, so I'm just going to get somebody else to do that. I'm not afraid to call it quits sometimes when it's just out of my skill set. But yeah, the engine's fine. Let's have a look at the rest of the running gear. So how would I describe the gearbox? Well, it's the worst sounding gearbox in any Morris Minor that's given me no trouble. I can't really sum it up better than that. The gearbox sounds awful. It sounds like a bag of bolts in first, it whines in second, third and fourth. The main issue I have with it is not the gears, but getting into them. The gear shift is really, really sloppy because there's I think it's a nylon linkage in there that's quite worn. So sometimes getting from second to third has been a bit of a problem, but it's never really caused me that much of an issue. But surprisingly, considering how loud it is, there's no issues with the gears. I've only ever had it jump out of gear twice, and those were both in the first 2 weeks of owning the car when I didn't know how to do hill starts. I learned to drive in a car that had hill start technology. Those are the only times it's ever jumped out of gear. I've never had a problem with it since. It just sounds bad, so I'm going to do nothing at all. Shout out to my cousin Josh, who sold me a entire new gearbox that I could drop in at any time, so I'm not really too concerned. I still need to pay him though. Sorry Josh, don't send the bailiffs. Now the rear axle is fine. I haven't really had any issues with it, so to speak. There was a small leak on one side, so oil was seeping out on the driver's side, but I replaced the breather, which was blocked, and nothing else has come out of it since. So there's nothing wrong with the axle. Obviously the prop shaft was completely rebuilt back when I had the engine out. So in terms of that, the running gear is fine. The suspension, however, is, well, it's a bit like a 2CV. I wasn't joking about that 2CV bit. The entire car's suspension is so soft and squishy because it's given up. Not only does it bounce up and down, look, it goes from side to side. It's really bad. Now the problem is, basically, all 4 of the suspension dampers are oil dampers. They're lever arm oil dampers. They were a bit old-fashioned even when the car came out. And they've completely failed. What happened was, they were already a little bit weepy, so I flushed all the old oil out, put new oil in, and all of it poured straight out. All of it. So I've got to replace all of the suspension dampers, but that's not even the worst of my woes. The front suspension was fully rebuilt by a friendly mechanic because it was really badly knocking, so that's fine. The rear suspension, however, it's scrap. It's absolutely awful. The springs are not only rusty, they've got lips worn into them, or anything that's rubber under there is completely perished, and quite simply, it's just time to get new, honestly. So a full rear suspension replacement is the most economical thing, alongside replacing all of the dampers, and that's probably one of the most major issues on the car. It's not the most major issue, that'd be stopping it. So the brakes are probably the most important part of a car. After all, if you can make it go but not make it stuck, you're going to end up in a hedge. Now Morris Minor brakes were not very good to begin with. They are all-round drum power assisted brakes. Jeans are abhorrent. They're absolutely terrifying. It's part of the reason I'm not driving the car at the moment. Something has gone horribly wrong in the brakes. Not only do they feel weaker than they should, if I'm braking at any sort of load, the steering wheel will judder absolutely alarmingly, and occasionally it will just lurch to the driver's side, which is terrifying. So I know something's gone wrong, that's why I'm not driving the car. Now, the problem with the judder is that you might think it's the brake drums, but I actually put new brake drums on there and they're still the same. So I think that the hubs have gone completely. Now, I was told the hubs were pretty much worn out when I had the bearings changed about a year ago. So I think the bearings have gone again and the hubs have decided to go with it. So that's a big job. Before I can take this car in any sort of drive, all new brakes are needed to go on this thing. I don't want to do that. I did that when I first bought the car. I want to do it again. But I've got to, haven't I? So look forward to the full brake replacement. Hope you enjoy that one. If I were to sum up my electrics on my car, I would just tell you that Morris Millennium told me on 2 separate occasions when my car was in for welding that I need to replace that loom as soon as possible. It was 3 years ago and I've done nothing about it since. Actually, no, that's a lie. I have done this. This is an entire custom Morris Minor loom from Autosparks that includes basically every single modification that I could think of to go on it. So this thing I bought at the start of 2021 and I haven't got round to fitting it since. It's a Morris Minor loom that has loads of additional parts on it. So this has got reversing light, hazard lights, fog lights, spotlights. It's got radio and a cigarette lighter socket. Basically everything that could go on it has gone on this. I've never got around to doing it because replacing a loom scares me, but I've been having so many electrical issues that quite simply I can't put it off any longer. I'm having constant breaks in the wiring. I've had things like the horn stop working, lights going off randomly. The electrics are just completely past it, and they're actually a fire hazard at this point. I really need to change this. So this is actually going to be the next big job. Of course, I've got to pull a lot of the car apart again, so I'm dreading it, but it's got to be done. So Yeah, it's not great. Now there is a bit of a weird one. For some reason I can't get the alternator to charge on my car, and you might think maybe the alternator's dead, but it's a brand new one and a brand new battery, and yet the car sometimes will be dead. So I think that there's either a drain on the battery or the alternator's not charging properly. So that's another electrical issue to deal with, so I'm gonna have to dig through there. But yeah, a whole loom. This has been on the shelf in my garage for 3 years now. It's been making me feel guilty. This is a normal angle, isn't it? This is how people sit. So back in 2020 during lockdown, this car went to Morris Millennium to be completely rebuilt underneath. So in terms of the structure, you might think she's perfectly fine. And yeah, looking underneath, the car's perfectly fine. However, when you're not looking underneath, you can see that there are substantially more issues. Take these arches. They've given up completely. There's a bunch of little spots in this car that need a lot of welding, but it's all very expensive, very fiddly body welding, so it's a bit out of my skill set. I can weld, but not that good. So this car needs to go back to Morris Millennium. Let's just have a look at some of the highlights. Like the arches, just pointed them out, they've completely failed. Just rust bubbles all the way across. On the inside of the boot, you can see through the car. And that's not even like a small bit. No. We're talking inch-long holes here that just let everything through because they're completely rotten. You might think, why didn't I just take the wings off and fix them? I can't. They've been welded on. The original bolt holes for the wings had so rusted out that some Burke welded them in place. I cannot take them off. It's not the only bit either. Underneath the rear windscreen here and underneath the front windscreen, there's rust bubbles everywhere. The water just pours in when it rains and causes havoc on the inside, but that's because it's completely rotten under here. Similarly, right here, this back panel's got massive bubbles because it's getting quite thin in places. They might need to replace this whole strip. You've got problems, the bottoms of the doors have rotted off, so there's just great big holes where the bottoms of the doors should be. The sills on the outside look really rough, and the wings are scrap, completely scrap. These ones are so bad that they're not worth saving. One of my front wings is worth saving, the other one, no. It's a lot of structural work that needs to be done still to make this car really the best she can be. So the arches are the main priority. They're the ones that need doing first because, just good heavens, I can't be leaving them like that. And then eventually I'm going to get the rest of it done. Now Morris Millennium have quoted me up to do this. It's going to cost me £1,000. I don't have £1,000, so it's not getting done yet, but it will be done. And I've got a brand new pair of rear wings, one of which has never been fitted to a car, to go on the car to replace these because they're made out of Swiss cheese. Let's get the elephant out of the room first. Cosmetically, Jean is not the best example of a Morris Minor. Some might say she's the worst. When I bought the car, she looked alright, but it was a very dull paint job. I did polish it up, but then when I went to university, I had the wonderful thing of living next door to a building site for an entire year. So Jean just spent an entire year covered in concrete dust. And because I wasn't able to really give her a clean then, it just wrecked the paint completely and utterly. Just this very nasty matte paint. And I could spend some time polishing her and stuff, but the paint's actually so thin in places that when I was at the NEC we tried to polish her and it just rubbed straight off. It went straight through to the underlay. Obviously the bonnet doesn't match colour because I was told the car was royal blue and I was lied to. So this is a royal blue bonnet on a not royal blue car. Now originally she was Trafalgar blue, but at some point sometime between 1998 and 2017, because I've actually got pictures of the car in 1998 in Trafalgar blue, the doors were replaced, and because the doors are maroon, the whole car was repainted with a brush. So hence that's why she has this unusual blue colour that you wouldn't see on most Morris Minors. I think there's about 3 or 4 that have a very similar colour. Now I'm not going to do anything about this right now. There's a reason. There's a couple of reasons. Number one, I quite like how Jean looks. I might be in the minority on this one, but she's a 57-year-old car. She's had 16 previous owners. She is not going to be a perfect example of a Morris Minor because she's never been restored. But also, because the previous mentioned bodywork still needs to happen, there's no point me repainting the car now when whole sections of her is going to have to be chopped out. All of the gutters, around the windows obviously, new wings all around. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to leave the paint as it is, and when all of the bodywork is finally done, then we'll do a repaint. Whether that be a rattle can paint job or a professional paint job, really just depends on money. It's like everything with a classic car. If anyone tells you they're cheap, don't listen to them, they're lying to you. Now, Jean's interior is kind of like my sense of self-worth. It is but a shadow of its former self and is deteriorating rapidly. Yes, I'm in therapy. I joke, but yeah, the interior is pretty bad. When I bought the car, I had a complete, mostly original interior that looked rather nice until you looked a little bit closer. Mostly when I started taking things apart to get at other things, and stuff literally just fell apart in my hands. Perfect example of these door guards. They've just completely given up. They're so mouldy that the fiberboard just rotted apart. The rear seats, while intact, are very uncomfortable. The front seats have obviously been replaced with ones from a Metro. I do have the originals, but they're far too uncomfortable to use. The carpet's disgusting. Half of the interior panels are missing. And really it just needs completely redoing, and that's my plan. I could go and buy a full door cards and carpet set, but why would I do that when I can make them? So I'm going to make a whole new interior for this car, custom built, because I want to change a couple of things, you know, like I want to be able to put things like cup holders, make it more comfortable. I want to put map pockets in and nice plush carpets and stuff like that. So that's kind of where I'm going to go with this, but for right now it's bad. It's really bad. So the plan is a whole new interior basically, because there's not much of it that's salvageable. The only thing of interest is that the gear knob still has the original paint on the numbers. Thought you'd want to know that. So that's a fairly exhaustive list. No, it isn't. That's nothing. Those are the main issues that Jean has, the ones that I really want to tackle soon, the main obvious ones. That is not an exhaustive list of what's wrong with this car, because if I did that, we'd be here all week. There's a lot of little issues. This bonnet does not fit properly at all. The lights don't fit properly and they've gone a bit dodgy. The quarter lights need sorting. It leaks like a sieve. Even stuff like the door handles don't fit properly. I need to fix the roof rack because it's got cracks in it. The wiper won't park properly, although that's an easy fix. There's a lot of little issues. Those are the main ones. Those are the ones I want to be focusing on right now to get Jean up and roadworthy, because I want to drive this car again. I'm not doing it much at the moment because she can't stop. So what am I doing next? Well, there are three big things I need to work on right now: the electrics, the brakes and suspension. All three are massive issues for the detriment of driving. Obviously with the brakes, stopping's a bit scary. With the suspension, driving's a bit scary. And with the electrics, parking it is a bit scary in case I come back to a burnt out shell. So that's the focus. What I'm probably going to do is tackle the loom first, as I've already got the loom. We're going to have to take a lot of the car apart to do the loom. That means, you know, the interior is going to have to come out, the front grille is going to have to come out. But I want to do that one properly, so that's going to be a whole very careful guide on how it's done. And then we're going to tackle the brakes, the hubs and the suspension next. That's probably going to be my winter project. I've got a lot to be getting on with, so I look forward to getting on with it. No, I don't. I'm scared. Thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry it's been a very long time since I've released a video. I'm really working on trying to get to more regular stuff, so you'll be seeing more from me fairly soon. Don't worry, I'm going to stick to that because I've told all my friends I'm going to do that, and they won't leave me alone until I release content. I love my friends. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you all in the next one. See you then.